Hi guys, welcome to Pea Puffer Kingdom. This is episode 19. My name's Rob, and today, after a few requests on the last video, we're going to be looking at how I clean my Pea Puffer tank. Now, this is going to vary depending on what size of tank you have, but hopefully there's going to be enough here that you're going to find it at least interesting, helpful, and at the very least, whilst we're locked down in this kind of strange situation, gives you something to watch, doesn't it? So hopefully you enjoy this, and let's get on with the cleaning. So right now I'm just laying down the towel so that I don't get any of the floor wet and soaking with renting, so I don't want to damage the floor. And putting the towel over the plug sockets in case any water splashes out. Don't want to electrocute myself. And this is the Anubis plant that I have that's right at the top of the tree in my tank. It's got some blackbeard algae growing on the top. And you can use a scourer to scrub this, is what I do a lot in my tanks. I might not do it this time around because it's not looking too bad. But sometimes I'll get a scourer and just give it sort of a light scrub just to get rid of it. It's a bit painstaking, can take quite a long time to be honest, but it can be worth it, especially if it's only just a little bit. If you keep on top of it, it's quite easy to get off the leaves and keep clean. Now those leaves at the back here, the Java fern, with the markings on it, the little brown marks and stuff, they'll probably die off to be honest. They don't do too well in my tank. But the Anubis doing well. The Cryptocorn, I can't remember what type this is now, but you see the roots are massive growing out of the sand now. So I need to try and pile the sand up over these a bit more to cover them up. But they still grow really well either way. It doesn't make too much of a huge difference. So now what I'm doing is I'm shaking the bits of spiderwood that I got the plants on so I can get all the dirt off them. Because I've got 3 ottos in here, 1 bumblebee goby and 9 pea puffer fish in a 40-gallon tank. Or if you're, UK, 180-litre tank. And that can build up quite a lot of dirt on the spiderwood and everything like that. So I'll give it a good shake without trying to stress out the puffers too much. This is the Anubis plants, taking them out. So I take everything out of the tank and place it on that towel. That's the reason I put the towel down. So this Anubis plant, I try and get them all on here whilst I'm cleaning. Just makes it easier to scrub the algae off later, off of the glass and that kind of stuff without knocking things over. And also just giving it a good sort of thorough clean. Now this is the cave that I've super glued moss now onto. I had moss balls, I've torn them open and spread them over the cave so that there's more places where the pea puffers can't see each other. So it's almost like a wall of moss to kind of cause a bit of a barrier between them so that they feel they've got more space. As you can see there, lots of dirt flying off the first few pieces there. And you can really see from the outside it looks like there's not that much dirt, but when you actually start cleaning it out and you start shaking things slightly, again, only gently, so that you don't disturb the puffers. You can see how much dirt's in there. This is a new leaf growing from the Anubis plant that I pulled out, and that's the very new beginning of a little bud growing out. And you might be able to see there, right at the front, there's that cut in the rhizome where I've sliced through with a knife to propagate it. And you can do that really easily with Anubis. They're great plants for that. And it's probably the only thing, along with the Cryptocorns, that actually flourish in my tank anyway. So now you can see all the dirt that's built up on this cave. It's a huge amount coming off it. I'll show you how I get rid of this all later on, because it's a lot of dirt to deal with. And this is only after a week and a half since the last clean. Sometimes it's a week, sometimes it's a week and a half. I try not to leave it too much longer than that, because obviously the water quality, you want to keep that up as well for these little fish. And then I'll just drip dry everything as I'm pulling it out of the tank before laying it on the towel. So I don't wait till it's completely dry, obviously, but the last few drops and I'll put it down. Here's BFP, wanting to be the star of the show. Hello. Hello. And most of the gang in the corner here, one of the ottos, the bumblebee goby there. I try and do it as gently as possible because they're going to find it a bit stressful, but obviously you can alleviate that stress as much as you can. And the otto having a good little swim around. They often go to the front of the glass when I'm cleaning out rather than hiding around the filter. And here's a little shoot off from one of the Cryptocorns where they sent a runner and started a new plant. Now I'm getting rid of the dead leaves as well, so you'll see on my fingertips that I've got some dead leaves, and I'll get rid of those as well when I suck all the dirt out. And it's just, yeah, very simple, very easy to do, keeping the upkeep of all your plants. I probably need one of those metal tools where you can kind of just pinch the plants and then stick them into the sand. It would be much easier. And then I put all the roots under the sand as best I can. There's still a few popping out, I think, but that's that. And then a few bits of wood that I put around for decoration stick in the sand. I'll give those a bit of a rub together as well, so I get rid of dirt there. We've got the algae strips that seems to just kind of dry up on the side, get a bit crusty. I get rid of the pieces that are flaking off because I'm sure it doesn't do anything bad to the tank water, but it's not really something you want floating around. It looks a bit nasty, doesn't it? So I'll peel that off as well and make sure that I get the edge of the tank clean too. So now we've pretty much emptied the tank. Last bit of wood there hanging out. And to get to that without stressing the fish too much, I just put my hand to that side of the tank where they are and just kind of bring it slowly back and forward to the glass to scare them away slightly, to let them know that I'm going to come and start doing stuff there. Obviously, you get some stubborn ones that don't want to listen. So now the tank's empty, I'm moving on to getting rid of the algae on the front of the glass, as you can see where my hand is there. And I use for that a scourer. Now, because I do this regularly, it's not really much of a hassle at all. I'll just scrub up and down, get my hands right down to the bottom of the glass as well, into the corners as best I can. Not too worried about being perfect, but if you can get it nice and clean, it's always good for you to look at as well, isn't it? And then some people use credit cards, people use razor blades. Obviously, you have to be safe as you can with those. And you can get all the algae off. Razor blades probably more if you've got the really stubborn algae on the glass, but at the moment, because I've got 3 Ottos in there as well, they do a really good job of cleaning the algae. And I leave the back panel glass completely full of algae so that the Ottos have always got that to munch on and kind of work our way through. So there's always algae on that back panel glass all the way across. But it's never too bad because of the Ottos. And then the side bits I generally leave clean as well. I'll give those a scrub if they got a particularly high amount of algae. You can see all the bits flaking off as well and dropping into the water. And then we'll get rid of those too. So now we're into, I was about to say the fun part, it's kind of fun, using the vacuum to get rid of all the dirt out of the tank. Now, this end of the tank, the near side, that's where a lot of the flow goes from the filter. So it's actually quite clear, even though you can see some muck coming up there. And the further away, the farthest 2/3 of the tank's where the dirt kind of really builds up. So we'll have to get into that. There's Buzz, being quite inquisitive. They're not shy, these fish, the Ottos are. But the puffers you can see at the other end keeping away from it because I've shooed them away. So there's no chance of getting sucked up by the vacuum. I've had a couple of times where they nearly have. But if you're careful, it's quite easy to avoid. Maybe not so much in a smaller tank, but if you've got a bigger tank like this, you're able to do that quite easily. So I'll drain away about 3 buckets out of the tank. So that's about probably, by the time I'm done getting all the water out of the dirt, it's about 20-30% of tank water because you don't want to change too much. Because if you do that, you can end up kind of causing a bit of an unbalance in the chemistry in the water. So if you're doing, medication stuff, you need to do that. But otherwise, if you're just doing tank cleans, you don't want to clean out too much. Just as much as you need to. And then once I've done all the vacuuming, I'll use the fishing net that I have for the tank. And I'll get rid of all of the debris that's kind of settled at the bottom of the sand whilst doing the vacuuming that I didn't quite catch with the vacuum, or won't get sucked up by the vacuum, or can't get out from underneath the filter with it. I'll use the net for that and just sort of swoop around and then catch the bits. So filling up the bucket of water, you don't see me doing it here, but I did put in the usual amount of Seach and Prime into there. So I always dechlorinate the water before putting it in, especially when you've got small fish like Pea Puffers. You don't want to do anything that's going to upset their kind of health. And then start filling the tank back up. Temperature wise, I just use my hand if I'm honest. I don't do like a proper temperature gauge. I'll put my hand in the tank water, get a feel for how that is, and then I won't put the water back in the tank that's been dechlorinated until I can feel I've got the right temperature. And here you can see where I've super glued Anubias Nano Petite. I've started propagating that from this clean out, the Nano Petite one, and it's really easy to do. You do the same kind of cut you would with the bigger Anubias down the main rhizome where they all grow from, and you just get super glue and you super glue the spot where you want them to stick into. So in my case, this cave bit here, and then you place the Anubias with glue. The one I'm using is Loctite on this time. I think there's one called Gorilla Glue as well, something like that, Gorilla Super Glue. That's really good. And you need to have, I think it's called cyanocrylite, or if it's how it's pronounced there. If you've got that in the glue, you're good to go. If you can Google this kind of thing as well to make sure that the one you're using or the one that you can get hold of is suitable. And as long as you got it bone dry by the time you put it in the tank, it'll be fine. You don't want to put any kind of wet or glue that's still drying up in the tank, because that can cause a bit of a problem with the water. But as long as you've got it dry, you should be fine. And yeah, so you just leave it on there. You just hold it against the glue for about 30 seconds to a minute. And just be gentle when you're putting it back in the tank, that you don't knock it straight off. And then eventually, throughout the time it's going to be in a tank, the roots will start growing and grab a hold of whatever you've glued it to, and it will stay in place. So as you can see, it's a time lapse of me putting everything back in the tank. I didn't think you wanted to see this in real time because that would be boring. I don't really care now if it looks beautiful and looks sort of pristine the way it's laid out. So I think as long as it's good for the puffers, that's me happy. So you can see on the right hand side there, it's quite messy and quite congested, but that's what they like. They like a lot of hiding places and a lot of things to explore. But I also think it's nice to have a bit of open space. On the top left, I've left that open, so they've got a bit of space to kind of have their food and collect it easy enough without getting stuck in all of these and that kind of thing. But yeah, really happy with the clean out. Looks nice. I think the puffers will really enjoy this. It's Tinchy Strider, having a little look around there. He's the smallest male that I have. He likes to kind of flare up and show off against Scar, one of the other male pea puffers, from time to time, especially around eating time. It's quite funny. And that is Grace. She's the biggest female that I have. Bigger than BFP, Big Friendly Puffer. Romeo, bottom right. Really good looking male there. Very healthy guy. They're all doing really well. I've had them for probably about a year now. And I haven't had a fatality for a year. And after the start that I had, where I had them almost dying left, right and centre that I was buying, I kept buying skinny ones, which is the thing you just can't do because you'll never get them back to health unless you're a real expert or lucky. And yeah, that's the pothos plant, or pothos, however you pronounce it in your country. This plant is really, really good for getting rid of nitrates in your tank. So if you Google what types of pothos you can use, it's probably more likely one that you have in your house if you have it already. And you can Google on YouTube how to cut them properly and then stick them in your tank. And over time, the two leaves on the ends there, they're the new ones that have grown, it will start growing out of the tank. And there was no roots on that when I first put it in. So over about a month, 2 months, loads of roots are growing from it. So guys, this is the pea puffers, getting used to the changes. I always change the tank around as well. This is something to always think about. When you're putting stuff back in the tank, rearrange it, mix it up, because they're very curious fish. Even though they're tiny, they're quite inquisitive and they're really clever, and they will use every millimetre of the tank, which is why it's important to make sure there's lots to do and explore in the tank. Otherwise, it's not so good. Well guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video on cleaning the tank out and how I do it. Hope some of it was relevant for you, or at the very least it was interesting and gave you something to watch during this time. Hope you're all staying safe, and thanks for watching.